All right, everybody, time now for our weekly partnership segment with The Lever. This week we have journalist Matthew Cunningham Cook, who has a deep dive into the roots of the Jackson, Mississippi water crisis. Let's go ahead and put this up on the screen here. And great to see you, Matthew, by the way.
Thanks for having me on, Krystal.
Always, always. So let's take a look at this tear sheet. We say, Wall Street is behind Jackson's water crisis. Why am I not surprised? A major credit rating agency jacked up interest rates in Jackson, Mississippi, curtailing infrastructure investments in the years leading up to the city's recent disaster. But you, Matthew, and your colleague here, Ricardo Gomez, you all go even deeper than the past couple of years into the real origins of this crisis. And I'm really glad you did, because we covered back when Jackson had that terrible winter storm, and there were massive issues then, and there was a massive awareness and understanding that this could be a continuing, ongoing problem, and yet, of course, the problems don't ultimately get fixed. And then fast forward, and we're covering once again, oh my God, they don't have water. The water's not safe to drink. There's, boil notice for weeks and weeks on end. So I would love for you to take us back to the beginning of how we ended up in this place where the infrastructure is so degraded, so dilapidated, and yet residents are still getting sky-high water bills in spite of the fact that the service is so poor.
Yeah, so I mean, the real beginning is the EPA, like they did in Flint, fell down on the job and were not monitoring the extreme levels of industrial waste dumping into Jackson's water system. So that's the reason why this system is so degraded, is mass industrial dumping that was not regulated by the EPA. But there's some more recent stuff. So in 2013, prior to the election of the current mayor's father, who was also a progressive, the city, under the leadership of a mayor who didn't have the tightest ethical practices, decided to automate the city's water billing system and issued a huge bond of $90 million to finance those upgrades. Turned out it was a total scam with Siemens. And the city, Siemens had to pay a huge settlement back to the city, but it never addressed kind of the core issues with this initial bond, which was the interest rates were very high as 6.75%.
Wow.
The mayor's father, who's also named Chokwe Lumumba, died shortly after taking office in 2014 and was replaced by another mayor with significantly compromised ethics, Tony Yarber, who was investigated by the FBI, and he refused to do anything to address the issues with the Siemens contract or with the bond. Chokwe Lumumba, the younger, when he was running in 2017, said, very cogently, we have a major crisis with our water system. It needs to be addressed stat. I am going to issue a new bond that will allow us to take the needed necessary upgrades. And because I have tighter ethical standards, you can be assured, Jackson voters, that it's going to actually happen.
Gotcha.
Right after he takes office, Moody's, the main bond rating agency, jacks down the bond credit rating of the city of Jackson into junk status. That means you can't refinance this big 2013 bond for a scam, and you can't. And any new bond is going to have very high interest rates. So he was never able to do it, and that is really kind of the root at the local level. And what makes it so outrageous, though, is that Moody's and the other bond ratings agencies do not rate municipalities based on the likelihood of default. Because if they did, then and they've said this themselves, that almost all municipalities would be rated very highly, either AAA or AA, very, very, very highly. Instead, they use all these other determinations to determine the creditworthiness of a given city, including wealth and poverty And that's really what happened here. And again, Moody's was explicit. We're shoving this city's bond rating into junk. We're kneecapping this new progressive mayor because this city has a high level of poverty. And that is just so different from how Moody's treats Wall Street and the corporate market. So even recently, in the lead up to COVID, they were rating tranches of commercial mortgage-backed securities at AAA, the highest rating ever, right before there's a world historic global pandemic that sends millions of people out of offices to work from home. And here's the core problem, is that corporate and Wall Street don't have taxing power. Municipalities do have unlimited taxing power. There are no consequences, meaningful consequences for Wall Street or corporate executives who default on their debt. Politicians who default on their debt face very real consequences. You've seen, I think, 4 governors of Puerto Rico since they defaulted on their debt. You saw the former, you've seen many politicians from Detroit sent to prison. And those are really the only 2 major places where you've seen debt default recently. The last time Jackson defaulted on its debt was during World War II. So it's really an outrageous double standard that ends up driving up the cost of public services for ordinary Americans, especially Americans who live in high poverty areas, while Wall Street faces no meaningful accountability whatsoever.
And where is the state of Mississippi and the federal government? Where are they when all of this is happening? Do they have money or tools at their disposal that could be used to aid the city that seems to have been forgotten by everybody?
Yeah, this was, I followed the Jackson stuff very closely for the last few years, and it was always very clear. The Mississippi legislature is dominated by a Tea Party kind of elite, and the governor as well comes out of that, and they're totally uninterested in helping the city of Jackson. And this is something we've seen time and again. There's that at the state level, and then at the federal level, you've seen, I believe, a close to 80% decrease in federal government investments in water infrastructure since the mid-'70s. So those are real consequences. But in terms of just in the last few years, how could the city addressed its infrastructure crisis? It would have happened had Moody's and the other bond rating agencies not kneecapped Mayor Lumumba. And that's exactly what happened.
Wow. And so what is the status of the water system in Jackson, Mississippi today? The last I had seen, but this has been a couple weeks ago, there was water flowing, but it was still under a boil advisory. Is the water safe to drink today?
It seems like no. It's certainly not safe for pregnant women or small children,
Wow.
So there's disputes, between the city and the state over this issue. This is a major problem. And unfortunately, congressional Democrats are not proposing to address the full scale of the crisis. So Benny Thompson, the congressman from Jackson, has proposed $200 million when Mayor Lumumba has said that they're probably going to need closer to $1 billion to address this problem. So it's an ongoing problem. It's an ongoing crisis. The federal government absolutely needs to step in right away with the correct amount of money. Now that's the only thing that can be done. But we know, we have pending water crises all around the country. And Moody's decision to rate municipalities so much more harshly than any other section of the debt market really is going to drive additional water crises, exactly like Jackson, in the years and decades to come.
It is so important to understand this. We just had news coming out still out of Flint about now charges were dropped against some of the officials who could have been held liable here. There was news about, I believe it was Chicago, with high lead levels. I mean, this is really an issue across the country, and not just in urban areas either. There are a lot of rural parts of the country that suffer with degraded water infrastructure. I know a lot of places in West Virginia and Eastern Kentucky that we've done stories on as well. It is a real sign of societal decay, decline, collapse, whatever you want to call it, that in such a wealthy society, we have so many places where people can't even take for granted the very basics of having clean drinking water.
That's absolutely right.
Thank you so much for digging into this. This reporting is crucial and helping us understand the mechanics being used by Wall Street to make things so difficult for these cities as well. Matthew, great to see you.
Thank you so much, Krystal. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, our pleasure. Thank you guys so much for watching. We'll have more for you later. Cable news is ripping us apart, dividing the country, making it impossible to function as a society, and making it impossible to know just what is true and what is false. But the good news is they are failing and they know it.
That is why we're building something new, a new mainstream, a healthier one, something more trustworthy, something that we are going to need in one of the most pivotal times in American history. We are building up here for the midterms, for the upcoming presidential election, but we need your help. So if you can help us out by becoming a premium member today at breakingpoints.com, we're trying to change America for the better and the entire world.
So what are you waiting for, guys? Go to breakingpoints.com and sign up and help us build a new mainstream.